Welcome to Bringing Romans to Life. I'm Preston Burrows, and in this lesson, we'll consider the analogies of the foot race and olive tree to better understand Paul's claim that all Israel will be saved. Paul begins chapter 11 with a timely question. Has God rejected or cast off God's own people? Chapter 11, verse 1. In a sense, Paul says, heck no. Look at me. I'm a prime example of one of God's elect people. And I have acknowledged Jesus as Lord. Yet Paul doesn't stand as his only form of evidence for God's continuing mercy to Israel. He again presents Scripture's own testimony in verses 2-4 to show that God has always had a remnant of people who remain faithful in relationship to God. When we get to verse 6, modern Bible translations often translate chapter 11, verse 6, in a way that suggests that being part of the elect was once based on works. The NRSV says, "But if it is by grace, it is no longer on the basis of works. Otherwise, grace would no longer be grace." But this undercuts much of what Paul has argued throughout this letter. And an equally valid translation would state instead, if it is by grace, then it is not at the same time from works. In other words, God has always chosen and justified people on the basis of grace and not merit, as I say in my commentary on Romans. In verses 11-15, Paul shines a light on the situation by considering an analogy. He thinks of Israel and the nations as running in a foot race towards the goal of salvation. Israel has stumbled over a stone on the path, the stumbling stone that is Jesus the Messiah. But they haven't stumbled to the point of falling. Rather, they're still in the race towards salvation. And as 11:26 expresses, it seems that God will steady Israel to the point that all Israel will finally finish the race. They'll reach the finish line of salvation. All Israel will be saved. He employs another analogy in verses 16-24. He reflects on the process of grafting. People from the nations are wild olive shoots that have been grafted into the strong, healthy trunk of Israel. Yet a few of the trunk's branches were removed for this process. Gentiles might be inclined to boast over their new chosen position as if Israel has been cast aside. But Paul has already insisted that God has not cast aside Israel. Yet the situation reveals that everyone's position on the tree results from God's mercy, grace, gift. No one has room to boast. Despite God's mercy, Paul acknowledges that some in Israel have become hardened. Since this same English word appears in Romans 9:18, it's important for us to note that the underlying Greek term here in chapter 11 is different. The term in 11:25 refers to a natural process of self-protection in which a tree, in this case, develops a callus where a branch has been removed. That hardening isn't a deadening. It isn't a permanent situation. Rather, it can function as a holding place where the removed branches might again be attached to the living trunk. This reattachment of Israel would happen, in Paul's view of history, when all the chosen among the nations would acknowledge Jesus as Lord. And this would happen imminently, in Paul's view, and in tandem with the final resurrection. While our minds might still be whirling from all of these profound thoughts, Paul confidently asserts that the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable, 11:29, and that God offers mercy to all, verse 32. He ends this section of the letter by offering a doxology in which he praises God for God's inscrutable wisdom and for being the source of all things. This section of Romans is decidedly difficult to interpret and apply today. Yet its function in the letter is quite clear. Despite any religious, social, or political eventualities, God continues to extend mercy to Israel, just as God has chosen to extend mercy to the nations through Jesus. And this means that the congregations in Rome must overcome their prejudices, their judgmentalism, and their pride. And they must instead welcome one another. I encourage you to reflect on the extravagant mercy of God and share your insights in the Living Scripture Community Forum.